The lawyer's letter arrived on a Tuesday, a crisp, cream-colored envelope that felt deceptively light. Inside, the words were heavy, each one a polished stone meant to crush me. Fraudulent inducement, it alleged. Coercion. It claimed the contract I held, the one that gave me a 60% stake in my sister Lee's business, was a product of manipulation. It demanded I surrender my shares within 7 days or face a lawsuit that would publicly brand me a predator. I read it twice, the legalese blurring into a single, venomous accusation. They were declaring war. A war against the very person who had single-handedly funded their peace for over a decade. How did it come to this? It started, as it always did, with Leslie's smile. A weapon she wielded with the casual precision of a surgeon. A month earlier, at my parents' 36th wedding anniversary dinner, that smile was aimed directly at me. The dining room was buzzing, filled with the familiar drone of cousins and family friends. Leslie, ever the radiant centerpiece, was holding court, regaling everyone with tales of her burgeoning online clothing store. My father nodded along, his face a mask of gruff pride. My mother, a ghost in her own home, floated between guests with a plate of appetizers, her smile as fragile as spun sugar. I took my seat, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. Then, Leslie's voice, sharp and clear, sliced through the chatter. How does it feel being the most useless one here, Angela? With your pointless office job? Her smirk was the punctuation mark. The table erupted. Not in awkward titters, but in full-throated laughter. My cousins, her husband, even my own father, his chuckle a low rumble of betrayal. Their amusement was a physical blow, igniting a bonfire of every ignored sacrifice. Every thankless check I'd ever written. My mother glanced away, her own smile dissolving. For years, I had swallowed this. I had let their casual cruelty define my place in the family hierarchy, the silent, dependable, and, ultimately, disposable support system. That night, something inside me didn't just break. It shattered into a million sharp edges. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, and met her gaze. My voice, when it came, was unnervingly calm. How does it feel? I asked. When this useless one stops paying your way. The laughter choked and died. Forks clattered against plates in the sudden, suffocating silence. Leslie's smirk faltered, her eyes widening in genuine shock. What? She stammered, the confidence draining from her face. I didn't wait for her to recover. I stood, the scrape of my chair against the floor, the only sound in the room. I walked out, their stunned faces a tableau of disbelief burned into my memory. That night wasn't just an exit, it was a declaration. I was done being their foundation. It was time they learned what it felt like to stand on their own. The first step was surgical. For years, recurring transfer of $2,000 left my account on the first of every month, a silent infusion of life into Leslie's perpetually struggling business. After the dinner, I logged into my banking app, my fingers steady, navigated to the scheduled payments, found the transfer labeled L-Biz, and pressed cancel. A small, digital confirmation popped up. It felt less like an act of revenge and more like an act of survival, finally tying off a tourniquet on a wound that had been bleeding me dry for years. The fallout was immediate. First came the frantic texts. Suppliers are calling. What did you do? I ignored them. Then came the voicemails. Leslie's voice escalating from confusion to shrill panic. Finally, my apartment buzzer screamed, a sharp, insistent demand. Through the intercom, I heard Leslie's strained voice. Angela, let us in. Now. Punctuated by my father's gruff command for her to calm down. Buzz them in, bracing myself. They stormed into my living room, a tempest of entitlement and fury. You cut me off? Leslie snapped, her arms crossed so tightly her knuckles were white. The store is a mess. You need to fix this. Fix it. I leaned against the kitchen counter, a strange sense of calm washing over me. I'm done fixing your messes, Leslie. My father stepped forward, his expression hard, his voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken authority. Angela, this isn't the time for games. Your sister's business is in trouble. You have the money. Put it back. It wasn't a request, it was an order, a reminder of the role I was expected to play. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Put it back. Dad, you have no idea. I walked to my desk, pulled out a thick folder, and dropped it onto the coffee table with a satisfying thud. Look at this. Leslie snatched the folder, her hands trembling as she flipped through bank statements, legal contracts, and notarized ownership papers. My dad leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. What is this? He asked, his voice low and uncertain. That, I said, pointing to the key document, proves that I own 60% of your family business. In 2015, when it was on the brink of collapse, creditors were calling and your accounts were frozen, I stepped in. I didn't just write a check, I negotiated with the bank and put in $40,000 of my own savings to save it. In return, I took majority ownership. You didn't know, did you? Leslie's face went white. This isn't true, she stammered, the papers crinkling in her grip. You're making this up. Making it up. I stepped closer, my voice cold and precise. I saved your business, Leslie, while you were busy calling me useless. I've been pouring $2,000 a month into it ever since, and you didn't even notice until the money stopped. You came to me last week begging for $50,000. I said no, I meant it. My dad's face was a mask of disbelief and rage. You don't throw this in our faces, he said, his voice rising. We're family. You help without waving it around like some trophy. Family. The word tasted like ash. Family doesn't treat the one paying their bills like garbage. Family doesn't demand more while giving nothing back. I pointed to the door. You came here for more. You're not getting it. Get out. My dad grabbed Leslie's arm and they left, the door slamming behind them, but the war had just begun. A few days later, my mother called, her voice a soft, pleading whisper, begging me to sell the shares for the sake of peace. She knew. She had seen the papers, heard the truth, and still. Her solution was for me to sacrifice more. That was when I knew I was truly alone in this. That's what led me back to the lawyer's letter. It was their answer to my truth, a desperate, fabricated lie designed to erase my contribution and paint me as the villain. Picked up the phone and called Karen Holt, a lawyer Nicole, my best friend, had recommended. I need you, I said, my voice not shaking. Leslie's suing me. Karen's office was a sanctuary of calm competence. I laid out the folder, the notarized contract, the years of bank statements, showing my initial $40,000 investment and the subsequent monthly payments, the emails from 2015 detailing my negotiations with creditors. She examined everything, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up, hint of a smile on her lips. This is a scare tactic, Angela, she said, her tone firm. And a clumsy one. Your documentation is airtight. The fraud claim is baseless. They have nothing. The courtroom was a sterile, wood-paneled box. Leslie sat across the aisle, her expression a mixture of defiance and anxiety. Her lawyer spun a tale of a naive, trusting sister manipulated by a cold, calculating opportunist. It was a compelling fiction. Then, it was Karen's turn. She didn't raise her voice. She simply presented the facts, one undeniable document at a time. The bank records, the signed contract, the email chains. With each piece of evidence, Leslie's story crumbled. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. The evidence is overwhelming, she declared, her voice echoing in the quiet room. The 2015 contract is valid. The claim of fraudulent inducement is dismissed. A relief washed over me. so potent it almost brought me to my knees. I had won. Across the room, Leslie's face was a canvas of shock and fury. She had lost. Store. Her identity remained legally, rightfully, mostly mine. The months that followed were silent. The lawsuit had been the final severing. My father never spoke to me again. My mother sent one last, pleading text. "I miss you," which I read and deleted. The silence was painful, but it was also clean. For the first time, my life was my own. I took a job with a local nonprofit, managing a community arts campaign. The work was demanding but deeply fulfilling. I started painting again, an old passion I'd sacrificed at the altar of family responsibility. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then came the invitation to speak at a women's conference on resilience. Standing on that stage, my heart hammering against my ribs, I told my story. I spoke of the invisible labor, the slow erosion of self-worth, and the terrifying, liberating power of saying no. The applause was a wave of validation, but the true reward came after, when women with tears in their eyes shared their own stories of silent sacrifice. In their faces, found a new kind of family, one built not on obligation, but on shared strength. My family, the one I had tried so desperately to hold together, was gone. But I wasn't broken. Leslie's store, deprived of its secret lifeline, was faltering. My shares were a constant reminder of the truth she refused to accept. But her failure was no longer my concern. My life was no longer about saving others. It was about building something for myself. Standing in my apartment, surrounded by my own paintings, I realized the truest freedom wasn't winning a lawsuit or proving a point. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that my worth was never theirs to define. It was mine, and I had finally claimed it.